Thank you also for making it to the end of day 2. I know it's been a very long program, and it's really amazing that you're still here, that you've got the good energy, and I hope that you enjoyed the conference so far. Well, it's been an amazing 2 days for me. I'm just coming off of 2 weeks of travel through Europe, several conferences that we've had there. And I always enjoy coming back to North America Symposium, seeing what's going on in this part of the world, and getting to see all of you again. My sleep schedule has been so crazy, so last night I was so looking forward to the networking reception and everything, and then as soon as my pillow hit the head, I was out. So I apologize for that, but hopefully if you're sticking around after, we can chat some and say hello. Well, to close the talk, I wanted to bring us back to, I think, the core of why we're all here, why we invest in technology, why we are interested in Liferay, which ultimately is not an end of itself, but is a means to an end. You know, a lot of times we get caught up in technology, and we want the latest and greatest things, but sometimes it takes our eyes off of what's truly important, so that's what I wanted to talk about. Well, of course, technology matters a great deal. It enables us to do things that we are not previously able to do. It gives us a lot of power to ultimately meet customer needs, right? And I thought as an illustration of that, it'd be appropriate to mention the work of Vincent Liferay. He is a photographer who has taken some amazing photos of major cities around the world using a camera, going up in a helicopter, using really sophisticated image stabilization equipment, long-range zoom lenses, and highly sensitive camera equipment so that he can take these photos with a great amount of detail. And as he was talking about the genesis of this project, he was describing a time that he was just absentmindedly pointing his camera into a dark area not so far away, which appeared black to the naked eye. But when he actually snapped the photo and looked at it, he noticed a detail there. There were some green leaves, red berries, things that he wasn't able to see. And it was a moment of realization that digital technology for him in the world of photography had actually surpassed his physical equipment. And so here's just a brief look at some of the amazing photos that he's been able to take using this method. Amazing views of London, New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles that you know, kind of open our eyes to a new world and seeing the world in a way that we hadn't before, right? And sometimes, whatever the equivalent of that is, maybe you saw it in some of the case studies over the last couple of days, other Liferay customers doing amazing things with technology, or you hear about things like Agrobotics and what they're doing with drone technology, and you have this visceral reaction, this desire to get your hands on the latest and greatest, right? And so technology certainly matters, but I wanted to remind us today that it's not as important as we think. And as an illustration of that, I wanted to bring a story from Japan. Sort of an unlikely place for a case study on big data. Japan, while known for its technological gadgetry on the consumer side, tends to be a little bit behind North America and Europe when it comes to enterprise IT. Well, 7-Eleven embarked on a major big data project. Here's just Google's estimation of where 7-Eleven is across the nation of Japan. You can see they have quite major coverage. In fact, when you compare it with the coverage of the post office in greater metropolitan Tokyo, you can see that they've even done better than the government there. So they embarked on this big data project, and they wanted to understand what consumers were doing, what they were buying, what their preferences were, and so forth. And in order to collect all of that data, what did they ultimately decide on using? Something decidedly low-tech. So what 7-Eleven did was they actually instructed all of their clerks in every store across the nation to basically, as they were ringing up purchases and seeing, collecting the purchase information, to also size up the customer, say, okay, he's male or female, about this age, and so forth. And so using this methodology, they were able to collect 7 billion pieces of point-of-sales data with which they're now able to predict the faintest of trends. In the case study, they talk about how 7-Eleven has a better handle on the demographic trends of Japan than any Census Bureau or even the tax agency, for example. So if you've ever been to Japan, you know that they're crazy about soft drinks and beverages. Out of 4,000 or 5,000 beverages on the market at any given time, they're always able to stock the most 70 to 80 best-selling items, right? So pretty cool case study, and the kind of consumer intelligence and insight that many of us might only dream about. And yet this case study came from as far back as 2002. It was one of the featured stories in the Harvard Design School Guide to Shopping. And looking at this case study, what that taught me in regard to technology is that ultimately it's a way of reaching your customer. It's a way of understanding what your customer wants, right? But it's not the only one. And what 7-Eleven did was they fundamentally took stock of the assets that they have, presence across the country of Japan, and of course, one of the best interfaces for collecting data, which is human to human. So sometimes you need to take a look at what you have as a company and use some of the most obvious things rather than rushing off to get the next greatest thing, right? Ultimately, what matters the most to all of us, I think, is to delight the customers. Liferay, as a software company, we're very much indebted to technology. It's the reason why we exist in a lot of ways, but we wouldn't be anywhere without delighting you, who are our customers. So sometimes delighting your customers means bringing out, the big technological guns and, going to the most extreme methodologies in order to get what you're after. But sometimes you can delight the customer in more simple ways. I personally, I'm kind of an enthusiast when it comes to taking photos, and I've probably taken over 10,000 digital photos over my lifetime. They're all in my iCloud somewhere, and I never look at them. But there's one photo that I do have sitting on the mantle of my fireplace, and it's this one that I took with our general manager of the France office last June. And the thing that struck me about this is that for Polaroid, and now it's Fujifilm and whatever else, it's actually not about, the latest and best photos, but it's about the experience, right? So we were at his apartment. We had just had dinner, and then they're showing me this, retro technology called Polaroid, and I said, hey, let's take a selfie. And so, we did this whole thing, and then the photo comes out, and you wait for it to develop, and it's just this still such a fun thing, right? So, something about the interface, right? Something about the human experience that makes or breaks the technology. In the same way, if you've been around Liferay for a while, you know that we have a vision for the company, and we have a reason why we do what we do. Like I said in the beginning, Liferay is not ultimately about technology. And it may not seem that way when you see some of our people in the hallways at different conferences. They are very much into our software and technology in general. But ultimately, if you talk to our people, they will all tell you that they're at Liferay because they believe in the vision of Liferay. And we went through the exercise this year as a company of actually verbalizing that in words. We realized as we're approaching about 600 people worldwide that we needed to have a way to easily share it and just communicate it with others. So here it is. Our vision is to see people reach their full potential to serve other people. What does that mean to us? So we are we're in the Western world, first of all, where it's always been about, in many ways, the fulfillment of individual potential. We are in the age of millennials, which is also really about maximizing individual potential. But the caveat to that, in our vision, is that that potential is for the purpose of serving other people. And I think that's a great way of putting your potential in proper perspective of how you function in the midst of a society where all of us are producers and consumers of value and services in many ways. So there are a lot of ways that we want to fulfill that vision. And in the past, we've probably shared about our volunteer program. We've talked about how we've sent teams to different parts of the world to do various activities like digging wells, for example. Or in the Madrid office, they recently participated in helping to prepare and paint a house for people who have been rescued out of human trafficking, right? But actually, what you'll also find at Liferay is that a lot of us are really about helping people fulfill their potential where technology often gets in the way, right? When we see our companies and the value that our customers and the value that they're trying to provide to their customers, we want to let technology get out of the way of that, right? And I hope that some of what you've seen in Liferay 7 convinces you that we can help with that problem. But we're also the first to admit that we're not always the best at doing that, right? Thank you for your patience with Liferay over the years as we have learned from our mistakes and evolved our technology so that it doesn't get in your way. But building a company, having success, having these events, it really is about, if we can be excellent in these areas, then I think we can ultimately impact the lives of others in more significant ways. I want to close with the story of another professional that I admire quite a bit, who is in a completely different line of work, but I think he really illustrates what we strive to be as a company and as individuals. You may be familiar with the work of Shigeru Ban. He's a Japanese architect. He has had his fair share of very high-profile projects for, in for-profit endeavors. This is the Metz branch of the Pompidou Museum from Paris. A beautiful building. One of his other projects in Tokyo. But his heart, and you may be aware that he won the Pritzker Prize for Architecture in 2014. His heart is really about the role of architecture in addressing humanitarian crises. And so throughout the world, in places like Rwanda, India, China, and New Zealand, he has built a number of buildings that are at once beautiful and restore a sense of dignity and space to communities that have been hit by these disasters, while also doing it in a sustainable way with a very fast time to market, I suppose, and doing this all using the excellence and the credibility that he's built up as a professional architect. And what I love about his example is that there isn't compromise here. There isn't this sense, and I think we had this in the early years of open source, for example. There's this kind of feeling like, well, the software's kind of buggy, it's hard to use, doesn't always make sense, but it's open source. And, it's free and you can just download it, so we'll deal with it. At Liferay, we don't want to use that excuse. We don't ever want to say that because we have this vision to empower others, that we somehow cut corners. So I love the fact that Ban's work is at once beautiful and excellent, but is also giving back to the community. And most recently this year, I personally had a chance to take a trip to Northeast Japan, where Liferay has had involvement and a heart for a while in the aftermath of the tsunami of 2011. And we had the privilege of visiting a town called Onagawa, which you can see here. If you actually zoom out on this in Google Maps, it's like, here's the Pacific Ocean, and then here's the harbor, and here's the city of Onagawa. So you can just imagine the kind of devastation that was wrought on this town 4 years ago. This is what the town looked like after it had actually been cleaned up several months after the disaster. But you can just see that what used to be a thriving downtown community here was completely leveled. And so Mr. Ban actually was able to lend his professional efforts and contribute. One of the buildings he built is the new train station. Again, very beautiful building here. It even includes a public bath here. But he also built some of the temporary housing. And what's actually cool about this from an architectural perspective is that these are actually shipping containers. He stacked it in such a way so that you also have sort of the open space and everything. But it's actually quite livable. And this is just a shot of the interior, actually. So there's a company called Muji that does interior home design and so forth. And they were able to provide some of that material so that, again, being a disaster victim and a recipient of aid didn't have to mean that they had to somehow endure subpar conditions. In interviews in receiving the Pritzker Prize for Architecture, Mr. Ban said that what makes him happy is for people to actually enjoy his spaces and his buildings and to do it happily. And I think that really resonates with us here at Liferay. It's not about the technology, but it's about delighting all of you as our customers. So as much as I love it when I see things like this, I love it even more when we have experiences like this. So after my opening keynote yesterday morning, I came out down the stage. A number of people came to say hello, and one of them was Alisa Sapochnikova. I hope I didn't butcher the name too much. And to be honest, I was expecting her to say, "Oh, nice keynote," or whatever. She'd say, "Hey, it'd be nice if instead of saying null pointer exception, you would actually give some useful information and say, document number 8,552 doesn't have a folder. Then I wouldn't have to hunt around for it for 3 days trying to figure out what it is." And I love that because it means that she cares enough to actually take the time to say, "Hey, Liferay, you're not doing your job in delighting me as your customer. Here's somewhere that you can improve." And the worst thing that we could have is for people to stop caring, right? So with that, I do want to say a huge thank you to all of you, our customers. You make this possible. Liferay for all of us has been, in so many ways, a dream come true. Being able to build a company on our own terms, without investment, to make the decisions that are going to be best for our customers and the community. I actually want to take a moment to especially thank all of the customers who have come to the conference to speak on our behalf. Jim Robertson from NYU, Kathy Rector from Vantiv, Charlene Williams from Consolidated Communications, Sumitra Kanungo from Telex, Signex representing IHG, of course, the lovely and talented Ann Anderson, who gave us a great keynote from HP, Peter Page from Blue Health Intelligence, Tim Otskoff from Infor, Charles Camarda from NASA, and finally Ginger Strain from CDS Global. Your words mean 1,000 times more than anything I could ever say from this stage. And the fact that we've been able to make an impact and a difference in the work that you do it means all the world to me and to Liferay. So thank you very much. I hope you had a wonderful conference. Please have safe travels back home, and we'll see you next year. Thanks.